The $50 million decision. Victor Wembanyama may have just made the most shocking financial gamble in modern NBA history, and his decision could change how every superstar negotiates his next contract. According to the story spreading across the league, the Spurs offered their franchise cornerstone a path toward an even larger payday. But instead of taking every dollar available, Wembanyama reportedly chose a 5-year deal worth roughly $252 million, leaving close to $50 million on the table. For most people, that is generational wealth. For Wemby, it may represent something bigger, the chance to build a championship team that can survive for years. This is not just another contract announcement. It is a test of what Wembanyama values most: money, legacy, or banners. By accepting less, he appears to be giving San Antonio more room to strengthen the roster and protect its young core. But what happens if the Spurs waste that flexibility? Because sacrifice does not guarantee success. Jalen Brunson showed how taking less can help build something special. Tim Duncan once made similar choices in San Antonio, but NBA history is also filled with stars who trusted their organizations and watched management waste the opportunity. If Wembanyama gives up millions and the Spurs still fall short, this decision could follow him for years. The league is watching. Veterans are debating it. Young stars may soon be pressured to copy it. Front offices could point to Wemby and ask their own stars to prove how badly they want to win. So, is this a new championship blueprint, or the moment one superstar gave away too much power? Where are you watching from tonight? Comment your city or country below. If you believe Wemby made the right decision, press 1. If you believe he should have taken the full money, press 2. Subscribe to the channel, because the real reason San Antonio needed that money changes everything. Why Wemby chose less? The reported logic behind Wembanyama's decision is simple, but the consequences are enormous. He was not choosing between being rich and being underpaid. He was choosing between two versions of power. One version gave him the biggest possible contract. The other gave San Antonio more room to build a roster capable of surviving deep into June. That distinction matters because the modern NBA punishes expensive teams harder than ever. Once a roster becomes overloaded with massive salaries, a front office can lose access to trades, free agent tools, and the flexibility needed to replace injured or declining players. A superstar can collect every dollar and still look around 2 years later to discover that the team around him has become thinner, older, and easier to beat. Wembanyama appears to be trying to avoid that trap before it starts. By accepting the smaller structure in this reported scenario, he gives the Spurs breathing room. That money could help preserve depth, retain young players, or add the type of veteran who changes a playoff series without dominating headline. It could become a defender who survives against elite wings, a shooter who punishes double teams, or a backup big who protects Wemby from carrying the entire defense every night. But this is where trust becomes the real currency. Wembanyama can leave money on the table, but he cannot personally decide how the Spurs spend it. He is betting that San Antonio's leadership will be disciplined, patient, and aggressive at the right moment. If the organization makes the wrong trade, overpays the wrong player, or waits too long to act, his sacrifice loses much of its meaning. That is why this deal is not only a statement about Wemby, it is a challenge to the Spurs. He has reportedly done his part. Now the front office must prove that it deserved the opportunity. San Antonio's master plan. San Antonio's future is no longer built around potential alone. The Spurs now have a player who could redefine both ends of the floor, and every decision must answer one question. Does this move help Victor Wembanyama compete for championships? The young core gives the organization options. Stephon brings size, defense, and the potential to become a powerful two-way guard. Harper offers another high-upside creator who could eventually ease Wemby's late-game burden. De'Aaron Fox adds speed, rim pressure, and the ability to attack before defenses can get set. If those pieces grow together, the Spurs could create one of the league's most difficult combinations of youth, length, and pace. But talented names do not automatically form a complete team. San Antonio still needs balance. It needs dependable shooting so opponents cannot crowd the paint. It needs experienced defenders who communicate under playoff pressure. It needs players willing to move the ball after Victor draws two defenders. Most importantly, it needs a clear hierarchy. Young stars can grow together only when everyone understands who leads, who closes games, and who sacrifices when the matchup demands it. The reported discount gives San Antonio more freedom to solve those problems. Instead of chasing the loudest available name, the smarter move may be finding several dependable players whose skills become more valuable next to Wemby. That approach reflects the old Spurs philosophy. Tim Duncan's teams were built around fit, discipline, development, and players who understood their role. Wembanyama gives San Antonio a chance to modernize that formula. He can protect the rim, stretch the floor, finish above defenses, and eventually become the late-game creator. But even a generational player needs structure around him. The master plan is visible. The challenge is turning that vision into a roster capable of winning 4 playoff rounds. The league reacts. The reaction around the NBA was never going to be simple, because players understand exactly what $50 million represents. Fans can call the decision selfless. Executives can describe it as brilliant team building. But inside locker rooms, the conversation is more complicated. Some veterans would respect the message immediately. A young superstar reportedly choosing flexibility over the largest possible number signals confident. It says Wembanyama believes he can earn more later, build a stronger legacy now, and trust his talent to protect his future. For players who have watched great teams collapse under financial pressure, that logic makes sense. Others may see something dangerous. Every time a star accepts less, teams gain another example to use during negotiations. A front office can point to Wemby and ask another player why he will not make the same sacrifice. Fans may begin blaming stars for roster problems that ownership and management created. A personal choice can slowly become an unofficial expectation. That is where admiration turns into pressure. Draymond Green and Shaquille O'Neal have already spoken about Wembanyama as a basketball phenomenon, praising abilities that seem almost impossible for a player his size. Their respect matters, but praising his talent is easier than deciding whether every star should follow his financial example. The league also knows Wembanyama is not an ordinary case. He is young, globally marketable, and positioned to earn enormous money beyond his NBA salary. A veteran nearing the end of his prime may not have the same freedom. A player with an injury history may need to protect every guaranteed dollar. So, the real debate is not whether Wemby was generous. It is whether his decision should become a model. That question could follow every major extension negotiation. Wembanyama may have intended to help San Antonio, but the ripple effect could reach far beyond one locker room. The Brunson blueprint. The comparison to Jalen Brunson is unavoidable because his contract decision changed the way NBA fans view sacrifice. Brunson accepted less than he might have earned by waiting, giving New York more control over its roster and more room to keep building around him. What once looked financially reckless later became part of a winning blueprint. That is the version of the story San Antonio wants to believe. The Brunson model is powerful because it connects sacrifice to results. When a star takes less and the team improves, every dollar appears to have a purpose. The decision becomes part of the player's identity. Leader, believer, winner. It stops looking like money surrendered and starts looking like control invested in the future. Wembanyama's reported move follows the same emotional logic, but his situation carries even greater expectations. He is being asked to become the foundation of an entire era. If the Spurs use the flexibility well, his decision could help preserve a core for years instead of forcing painful choices after one short run. Still, the Brunson blueprint can be misunderstood. A discount alone does not build a champion. The front office must draft well, make disciplined trades, identify undervalued role players, and avoid wasting the savings on contracts that create new problems. Coaching must turn talent into structure. Teammates must accept roles. Health and playoff matchups still matter. The true blueprint is not take less and win. It is take less only when the organization has a credible plan. Wembanyama is placing faith in San Antonio's culture and decision makers. The Spurs once built a dynasty around patience and collective sacrifice, but past success does not guarantee future accuracy. If it works, Wemby will be praised for seeing the future before everyone else. If it fails, people will ask why he gave the team a gift it did not know how to use. Boston's expensive warning. Boston represents the other side of the argument. What happens when championship talent becomes so expensive that keeping the roster together feels almost impossible? The Celtics built a title-level core through smart drafting, strong defense, lineup versatility, and multiple players capable of deciding a playoff game. But once superstar contracts rise, every supporting salary becomes harder to carry. A team can go from celebrating a championship to calculating which important piece must leave, not because that player failed, but because the financial structure no longer works. That is the warning San Antonio is trying to avoid. When 2 or 3 players consume a massive share of the payroll, the cost is not limited to ownership's tax bill. The rules can restrict trades, reduce roster building tools, and make mistakes far more damaging. An expensive team cannot easily replace depth. One injury can expose the structure, one bad contract can remain trapped on the books while the championship window narrows. Wembanyama's reported decision attempts to delay that pressure. But Boston's lesson should not become an excuse to blame stars for accepting contracts teams willingly offered. Players earn maximum deals because their performance creates enormous value. It is the front office's responsibility to plan ahead, understand the rules, and avoid building a roster that depends on impossible choices. This is why the Spurs must treat Wemby's sacrifice carefully. The saved money is not free money. It is borrowed trust. If San Antonio eventually loses key players anyway, the decision will look wasted. If the organization uses the flexibility to keep Castle, Harper, and the right veterans together, then Wembanyama may have protected the team from the type of breakup that has damaged other contenders. Boston shows how quickly success can become expensive. San Antonio has been given an early warning and, reportedly, an early advantage. Now, it has no excuse to be surprised. Is Wemby changing the NBA? Wembanyama's influence may already extend beyond blocks, dunks, and impossible highlights. If this reported contract structure becomes reality, he could change the way the league talks about leadership itself. For decades, stars were judged by production, awards, playoff success, and championships. Now, another standard is entering the conversation. How much financial flexibility did the player leave for the team? That standard sounds noble, but it can become unfair quickly. A superstar is only one part of an organization. Owners decide how much they are willing to spend. Executives decide which players to acquire. Coaches decide how to use them, yet when a roster fails, the highest paid player often becomes the easiest target. Wembanyama's choice could strengthen that pressure by creating a comparison every time another star signs for the full maximum. At the same time, his decision may inspire a different kind of ambition. Young stars could begin negotiating for control, flexibility, player options, and roster commitments instead of only chasing the largest total value. A player might accept less if the team promises to keep a core together or use specific tools to improve the roster. Contracts could become more strategic, connecting salary decisions directly to championship planning. That would be a meaningful shift. Wembanyama also has the rare ability to make the sacrifice believable. His global popularity and long career runway reduce some of the financial risk. More importantly, his game gives San Antonio an unusual advantage. Because he can protect the rim, stretch the floor, and create mismatches, the Spurs may not need to spend as much to solve multiple roster problems. In that sense, Wemby is changing team building because he changes what one player can provide. But a revolution requires results. If San Antonio wins, this deal will be studied and copied. If the Spurs fail, future stars will point to Wembanyama as proof that giving money back guarantees nothing. His contract may start the conversation. Only winning can turn it into a movement. The risk nobody is talking about. The most uncomfortable possibility is also the one nobody wants to discuss. Victor Wembanyama could sacrifice tens of millions of dollars, play at an MVP level, transform the Spurs into a contender, and still never win a championship with this core. That is not disrespect. That is the brutal reality of the NBA. Financial flexibility gives a team more choices, but it does not guarantee that those choices will be correct. Championships can disappear because of injuries, poor timing, bad matchups, failed trades, or one contract that becomes impossible to move. A promising young player can stop developing. A veteran can decline faster than expected. A coach can lose control of the locker room. Another franchise can build a stronger roster at exactly the wrong moment. Wembanyama cannot control any of that. He can dominate defensively, he can stretch the floor, finish above the rim, create impossible mismatches, and become one of the league's most feared players. But even a generational superstar cannot personally fix every weakness on a roster. He cannot force teammates to develop. He cannot guarantee that management will identify the right supporting pieces. He cannot prevent the Western Conference from becoming even more competitive. That is what makes this reported sacrifice so dangerous. By accepting less, Wemby would be tying part of his legacy to decisions made by other people. If San Antonio uses the flexibility wisely, he will be praised as a visionary. If the front office wastes it, critics may still blame him for not demanding more help or putting enough pressure on the organization. There is also a risk that the first sacrifice becomes the beginning of a pattern. Once a star proves he is willing to take less, the organization may expect him to do it again. Teammates may receive major contracts while his own generosity becomes treated as normal. What begins as trust can slowly turn into an obligation. That is why the Spurs must respond with visible progress. They cannot simply celebrate the money saved. They must turn that flexibility into shooting, defense, experience, depth, and playoff reliability. The roster must become stronger in ways Wembanyama can actually feel. Every move should show him that his decision created a real competitive advantage. San Antonio must also avoid becoming too patient. Young teams often believe they have unlimited time, but championship windows can close without warning. Wemby may still be early in his career, yet every elite season carries value. Waiting too long for the perfect trade could waste the years when his contract provides the greatest advantage. Sacrifice without accountability becomes exploitation. The greatest risk is not that Wembanyama may lose $50 million, it is that he may lose trust in the organization he chose to help. And once a franchise cornerstone stops believing in the plan, no amount of financial flexibility can repair the damage overnight. Championship or regret? There are two possible endings to this story, and they could define Victor Wembanyama's entire career. In the first ending, San Antonio uses the financial flexibility perfectly. Stephon develops into an elite two-way guard. Dylan Harper becomes the fearless secondary creator the offense needs. De'Aaron Fox gives the team speed, rim pressure, and late-game control. The Spurs surround Wemby with shooting, defense, experience, and role players who understand exactly what is required in the playoffs. That version of the future could be terrifying for the rest of the league. Wembanyama becomes the centerpiece of a team that can win in multiple ways. He protects the rim, stretches defenses, dominates mismatches, and gives San Antonio an advantage no opponent can fully prepare for. The young core grows together, the front office avoids financial panic, and the Spurs compete deep into the postseason year after year. If that happens, the money Wemby reportedly left behind will stop looking like a loss. It will become part of his legend. People will compare him to Tim Duncan not only because he stayed in San Antonio, but because he understood that lasting greatness requires more than individual numbers. His contract decision will be remembered as the moment he placed championships above the largest possible paycheck. Other players may study it, other teams may try to copy it. Every banner would make the sacrifice look smarter. But the second ending is much darker. The Spurs hesitate when they should act. The young players develop unevenly. The front office spends the available money on veterans who do not fit. Injuries interrupt momentum. The Western Conference becomes stronger, and San Antonio repeatedly falls short before reaching the finals. Then the same decision will be judged in a completely different way. Instead of visionary, people will call it unnecessary. Instead of leadership, critics will call it misplaced trust. Fans will ask why Wembanyama surrendered close money either. When the organization failed to provide the roster he needed, every disappointing postseason would reopen the debate. The emotional cost could become greater than the financial one. Wemby might begin wondering whether the Spurs truly matched his level of commitment. Teammates might face increased pressure because his sacrifice would always be hanging over the roster. Every major contract handed to another player would be compared with the money Wembanyama gave up. That kind of tension can slowly damage a locker room. The truth is that neither ending has been written. Wembanyama is not only betting on his own talent, he is betting on young teammates who are still developing, executives who must make difficult decisions, and a franchise trying to turn its championship history into a modern advantage. That may be the boldest part of the entire decision. Taking the full contract would have protected Wemby financially, accepting less places, more responsibility on everyone around him. It transforms the Spurs' future into a shared promise. If San Antonio wins, this move could become one of the defining decisions of the next NBA era. If the plan fails, it could become the moment Wembanyama trusted the wrong people with the most important years of his career. The difference between championship and regret will not be decided by the contract itself. It will be decided by what San Antonio does next. Legacy over money. The real lesson from Victor Wembanyama's reported contract decision is not that every superstar should accept less money. It is that salary, trust, timing, leadership, and team building must work together if a franchise wants to create something lasting. A discount can create flexibility, but flexibility alone does not win playoff series. San Antonio must turn that advantage into the right players, the right development plan, and the right decisions at the right time. The front office must preserve the young core without becoming emotionally attached to every prospect. It must add veterans without sacrificing the future. It must remain patient without wasting the early years of Wembanyama's prime. That balance will determine whether this decision becomes legendary or painful. For Wemby, the strategy appears clear. He is willing to exchange part of the largest possible payday for a better chance at building a sustained contender. That decision could strengthen his leadership inside the locker room, give the Spurs more freedom, and show teammates that he is serious about creating something bigger than individual statistics. But the most important lesson is also the most human one. Sacrifice should always remain a personal choice. No player should be shamed for accepting the contract he earned. NBA careers are unpredictable. Injuries can change everything in one night. A player approaching the end of his prime may never receive another major offer. A young star with financial security and global endorsement opportunities is in a different position from a veteran trying to protect his family's future. Respecting Wembanyama's decision should not mean using it as a weapon against everyone else. Front offices must also accept responsibility. Players should not be expected to repair mistakes created by poor trades, bad drafting, or irresponsible contracts. Owners cannot demand sacrifice from stars while refusing to spend when the championship window opened. True partnership requires accountability on both sides. San Antonio has now been given an extraordinary opportunity. If the reported numbers are accurate, Wembanyama has provided the organization with additional room to retain talent, improve the roster, and avoid some of the financial traps that have broken apart other contenders. But that room must be used intelligently. Every decision must support the player who chose to trust the franchise. The Spurs should remember that loyalty is not a one-way street. If Wemby gives something back, San Antonio must respond by building aggressively and honestly. It must communicate with him, protect the culture, and refuse to waste years waiting for a perfect opportunity that may never come. The goal cannot simply be remaining competitive. The goal must be winning championships. That is where legacy enters the story. Money can measure a contract, but it cannot fully measure impact. Championships, leadership, trust, and the ability to lift an entire organization can remain long after the final paycheck is deposited. Wembanyama may be trying to build that kind of legacy before reaching the peak of his career. Still, no sacrifice guarantees a banner. The Spurs must develop Castle and Harper. Fox must prove he can thrive next to Wemby in the biggest moments. The supporting cast must defend, shoot, and remain composed under postseason pressure. Management must recognize when patience is valuable and when hesitation becomes dangerous. Wembanyama has reportedly made his choice. The next decision belongs to San Antonio. Will the Spurs use this opportunity to build the league's next great dynasty? Or will they waste the most valuable gift a franchise player can provide? Comment 1 if you believe Wemby's sacrifice will lead San Antonio to another championship. Comment 2 if you believe he should have taken every dollar available. Subscribe to the channel, like this video, and share it with another NBA fan so they can join the debate. Because this contract may not only shape the future of the Spurs, it could change the way every NBA superstar thinks about money, loyalty, and legacy.